we interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
When 9/11 happened, I was 11 years old. I remember it like it was yesterday. I really didn't know what was going on, but we're all gathered around a AM and FM transmitter. It was a small receiver, pardon me. It was a small radio. Some of them you could put batteries in, some others you could even crank it up. It was just like aid. So, and I just got back from school and my parents were all worried and they're talking about, oh, they're going to bomb Kabul. And we had to flee. And I really didn't know the implications of any of it at that time. I was obviously too young. I actually kind of liked the aspect of chaos in it because we had to move from one place to another. I was never a set stall kind of person. So when I realized that we're going to have to relocate, it actually made me feel a little thrilled in a way, you know, and things changed from there on. But I will never forget. I said, like, oh, we're going to have to move because there is an imminent attack on the city that we lived in, Kabul, Afghanistan. And we lived right outside a military base. So there was no way we're going to stay there. So we had to go back to our hometown, Wardak, where I'm from. The thing is, in Afghanistan, when you say you're from somewhere, you don't have to be born in that place. Your lineage has to come from there. So your father had to have been born there, or your grandfather, or matter of fact, they didn't even have to be born there. As long as you had land, and as long as your ancestors came from that area, that's where you're from. So if you ask people like where you're from and they tell you they're from somewhere, it doesn't necessarily mean they were born there. So, and I loved going back there. So it was good 4 months after 9/11. And of course, I didn't know what it meant for Americans at that time. I had no idea. I was too young. I just knew how it personally affected me in the moment.
Yeah. And so when the way I would look at that is at 12, I would go out into what we call the country and visit, like, you know, in a rural area, visiting my grandparents, or at 13 years old, working in tobacco fields and kind of getting out of the city. And so everybody understands, like, when you're talking about that, you're talking about relocating because the adults knew that there was going to be danger coming and there was going to be chaos coming. But for you, it was like an adventure to kind of get back or get out into an area outside of the city. Now, how did things escalate from then moving forward?
That's right. So for me too, I grew up splitting my time in half. I spent half of my time in urban areas, and then the other half was spent in my hometown up in the mountains country. I mean, it is pretty country. I had to look after animals and, you know, ride donkeys, ride horses, horse around with my friends. So that's what I loved. So like when I realized that, okay, we're going to go there, I was like, oh, I actually like this idea. You know, this is good. And then from there on, so everything where I grew up, the countryside, everything in there is indigenous to that valley. It's a small valley called Chuck. I mean, the only thing that you'll see that have been imported are the vehicles and probably the guns. Those are the only things that are not organic to the valley. So everything else that you see, it's either, you know, the people have never left that area. The produce is produced there, you know, so they're very independent in that regard because everything comes from there. And that has like a special aura to it, you know, to get to experience a place where like it is so independent. so primitive that I've never seen anything like it. I don't think we can even replicate it other than like going to a place that's as remote as that valley. Um, so then I have to pursue my education over there. I have to get used to living a normal life there versus before when I would go there, it was just, um, a few days and then, I'd go back or maybe a month. But now I have to stay there until the bombing campaigns are over. And we don't even know if it'll be over or not. We didn't know there was going to be a ground invasion. So we're just sitting and waiting for things to clear up. Spent about 4 months there, 4 months. So we went there in September. Yeah, like end of September is when we went there and came back like February to school to Kabul. Things have changed a lot by now. When I get back to Kabul, we see international troops all over the place. There's Italians, there's Americans, French, soldiers just patrolling the streets, and there's a lot of Northern Alliance. I don't know how much you know about them, but there's a lot of them around, and the Taliban are gone. There is a relative feeling of peace there, but it was hard for me because I grew up Pashtun. I come from a Pashtun background. We're not the most well liked by the Northern Alliance, because majority of the Taliban are Pashtuns, but that's just the curse of Afghanistan. Pashtuns are very involved in both sides. They've been involved in politics and in war, and so. But it is a tribal country, so whether you like it or not, they're not going to give you credit. You're always going to get the short end of the stick. Um, and then I get back. We have to go back to school. I was already speaking a little bit of English before this, so I was good on the English portion, and um, I was like, you know what, this is actually not bad. My sister was able to go to school. Um, People were more hopeful. My mom could go outside the house. You know, things were different, very different. And then I was always a nerd. I always read books. So, but before I was picking up these books that I would rent out, and they were just novels about American spies and American special forces operators that were translated from English into Farsi. And I'd pick them up for, I think, 4 cents a night. And I would try to read them as fast as I could because I didn't want to incur 2 nights. So pick up the book early in the morning, read it all throughout the day, read it overnight, and then return it in the evening because they charged us per night, not necessarily per day. So I'd get 2 days and one night use out of it because I didn't want to spend money on it. Now I had access to English books that the American soldiers would read. So Tom Clancy, Stephen Coons, these guys that were like high octane, action filled novels. And I started reading them. And I was like, you know what? I want to be like these characters. I want to experience what's it like to be in California, hanging out with blondes or like being on the beach. And, so I was like, okay, I got to do this. Like, this is what I want out of life. It's pretty strange because in Afghanistan, you don't necessarily think like that. You know what I mean? But I think human feelings are universal, regardless of location. It's just how you're prompted. And I was prompted to think that way because of the books. And I didn't have, like any male figures that I looked up to sort of like direct me and point me in a value system that was more relevant to my geographical location. my father was always out working, so I was just a nerd reading books, and I was like, these are the closest, people that I can find as idols to look up to. So I was like, I'm going to pursue this. And by now, the the American soldiers have been in Afghanistan for quite some years, and I speak pretty fluent English, and I've also picked up some Russian, and I speak Urdu and Pashto, and I've spent a ton of time in tribal areas. In my off time, when I'm off from school, I'd spend all my time in my hometown, which is as tribal as they can get. So I have good understanding of the culture and people. So to walk up to a base and I'm like, hey, I would like to work for you guys as a translator, because I felt that was like the closest thing to a platform to enable me to do the things I wanted to do from the books, right? And so I walk up to the base and I tell the soldier, like, hey, I want to work as an interpreter. He looks at me. I must have been like 16, about to be 17 at this time. And he's like, how old are you? And I had some beard over here, and some on the side. There was nothing else, and I looked pretty young. And I made sure to like not shave this, because that's like a status thing. It's called a virgin beard, So I was like, I'm not gonna get rid of this. I said, oh, I'm 17. He's like, well, you have to be at least 18, so you can't do this. So I go back to the ID office. When you're born in Afghanistan, they don't give you a birth certificate. So what they do is you have to take your dad's ID and your grandfather's ID, and you just walk into this office and you say, hey, I'm his son and I'm his grandson. And then they have to look up this book and verify, okay, these people are real. And they're like, okay, well, here you go. This is your ID. How old are you? Sometimes they just look at you. They'll tell you, like, pull up your pants. And you pull up your pants and they look at your legs to see if you got hair or not. If you got hair, they're like, okay, well, he's at least like 18 or 19. They don't care if you put in, you're 20 or 22, if you're 18. They just don't want you to tell them you're younger than what you actually are. They don't care if you put in older. So I go to the ID office and the guy looks at me. He's like, how old are you? It's like, I'm 19. He looked at me. He's like, you don't look it, but okay, I don't care. So, because I'm obviously a lot younger. So I get the ID and I go back and they're like, okay, you have to take this test. I take the test and I pass. And then they tell me, like, okay, well, we'll call you. And they write down my phone number. I don't have time to like wait around. And I'm a very like active and anxious type person. I always have to do something, So I contact another company, and they do transportation for, they call it host nation trucking, with basically carry loads for the U.S. military from the major bases into smaller FOB and fire bases, and then vice versa. But this was a local company. The guy who had a contact for it was a local guy, and as soon as he found out that I spoke English, we went to school together, and he knew that I was Pashtun. I had that tribal connection, and I spoke English. He's like, hey, I'll give you a guy who will do all the books for you. I'll give you another guy who will cook, and another guy to drive you back and forth. You're going to go to Host. Host is a small town. It's a smaller city, not necessarily town. Southeastern Afghanistan. So I was like, okay, no problem. I go to Host, and now I have to translate, but only outside the base, and I only have to translate things that comes to transportation. So I have to go on base and ask the American soldiers, like, oh, what do you need moved? When do you need them moved? How many trucks do you need? Then I have to come outside and talk to the Afghan truck drivers and hire them, like, hey, you're going to go to the base at this time. You're going to pick up this and you're going to take it there, and this is your paperwork. And then I have to hire these escorts that are just basically a local militia, and that are just warlords and crazy guys. I have to hire them to escort these trucks that I just tasked with taking this stuff, and they will accompany the trucks and get them through the dangerous areas. And oftentimes these guys are also like in cahoots with the Taliban. So you have to know who you're dealing with, because they're like, okay, we're gonna take your trucks across this area, but it's gonna cost you like $1,000. And would be like, okay. And then they would split the half with Taliban or whatever their deal was. But I didn't care. As long as what we wanted to move was moved, that was the deal. So I did this until I got the call, and they were like, hey, you have to go with the Marines, the 24th MEU, I think. You have to go with the 24th MEU to Kandahar. And I was like, oh. Even though I ended up joining the Marines in the beginning, I was like, yeah, I don't like it. Like, call me if you have a spot for like to translate for the special forces or something. They were like, okay. Well, you're going to lose your chance. You will never be an interpreter again. I said, I'll take my chances. That's okay. So I continued doing what I'm doing. They call me again, and they're like, you have to come to Bagram, this giant base in central Afghanistan. And you will work for this task force Gladiator, I think that was the name. And to me, it seemed like it was a cool thing, Task Force Gladiator. I was like, this sounds pretty big, you know, like I want to be a part of this. So I end up going there, and I have to go through the processing. They get us processed. We're just sitting in a chow hall one day, and there's 14 of us that came to this task force, 14 Afghan interpreters. I think I was probably the youngest of them all. And I'm sitting there in the chow hall. An NCO walks in, you know, he's in charge of the interpreters, and he's like, who wants to volunteer to go on a mission? And like I said, I was always the anxious type. I was like, I want to go. He's like, okay, pack your shit and show up tomorrow at this time to this location. I was like, okay, fine. So I didn't really have much. It just had like cargo pants and like pair of running shoes, and I don't know, like very simple items. Like I had nothing at all. So I just show up there, and they're having a briefing like, oh, we're going to go through this route, and there's a possibility of ambush at this point, you know, RPGs and PKMs and, you know, IEDs. And I'm like, holy shit, like this, I didn't know this was going to happen, but I guess I'm in too deep now. So just keep going. The guy looks at me, and there's like a certain level of disregard when you meet a stranger in a place like Afghanistan. This is a level of hostility, even if you were not born there. Like we treat people like that. And I think even for the foreigners who come in there, they kind of pick up on that. Otherwise, like you don't smile at people. This is not, you know, like there's no smile. And the first interaction never starts with a smile. If you try to smile at people in the first interaction, they're going to think you're out to get them, you know? So this guy looks at me, it's the driver, and he's like, hey, you know how to use this? And it's just like with a little bit of disregard, just, you know, good old hellbilly from Pennsylvania. he pulls up an AK. Like, yeah, sure, of course I do. So he gives me the AK, and he has like 3 or 4 mags in his hands. There's a mag in the AK. He's like, here, take these 2. I was like, where do you want me to put these? I'm just wearing cargo pants and, you know, a vest. There's no pouches or nothing. He's like, I don't give a shit. Put it in your pockets. You know? So I put the magazines in my pocket. I grab the AK, and we start rolling. We get to the base that I'm supposed to be at. It's a small fire base, Morales Fraser. They drop me off, and half of the convoy, they're going to stay here. I think like two 2 squads, about 8 trucks. We're going to stay here because that's their base, that's their fire base. And then the rest of the convoy goes down to Kushba. It's another fire base just like 20 miles down on the MSR. I just barely sat down. They suddenly start running. Get your shit, we have to go. So I have no idea. I just grabbed the AK and I grab the Kevlar vest and I get back in the truck. We go down. The convoy that left us, that dropped us off and they continued, they just got ambushed and one of the soldiers died and somebody else got hurt. And, it's this whole thing going on, and they have his body and they have like a little, field ceremony memorial type thing. So it's like, oh, wow. And the rest of the interpreters that came with me, all of a sudden they have gastrointestinal problems. They want to leave. They don't want no part of this. They're like, oh, I have diarrhea and, I can't do this. I'm too sick. I shouldn't be here. I have some condition, and someone's saying my dad is sick. Oh, his dad is my uncle. I have to go. So like there's all kinds of excuses. Out of that group, there's only 4 of us that stayed there. And then everybody else, the rest of the 10, they left. To me, for the first time, I was in a place where I had my true calling. I had immense amount of hate for Taliban and what they represented and what they stood for. I felt like they robbed my childhood from me because we grew up in absolute poverty. We had to deal with horrible problems, and I blamed it all on him. And I think I had the understanding to, because of, obviously growing up in a moderate family and being educated, my parents being educated and me reading books, I had the understanding to know where the problem laid, and I could shift the blame at them, because I was like, they're the problem. One of the reasons why I haven't had meat in 2 years as a child is because of their policies. So I had this immense hate for them, and I was in the right place with the right mission, surrounded by the right people, and I was compensated for it. And I also loved action. I just didn't know why I loved the action. I just had no idea, but I was obsessed with it. I had to go out on patrols at least like 3 or 4 times a week. I was going on patrols every day, twice a day. I'd go to the other interpreters and tell them like, hey, do you mind if I go? They're like, you want to go instead of us? Like, you are risking your lives to get blown up? And I'd say, yes, yeah, I want to go. I'd just wake up in the morning. I looked forward to going outside the wire. I looked forward to getting in, contacts, and I liked it. I didn't know I was an adrenaline junkie. I just didn't know. That's what it was, So I kept going on missions, and it helped my reputation. Because of growing up Pashtun and because of knowing how to deal with my people, I had a very good advantage over other interpreters. I understood who had power in any room that I went to. There's a lot of tribal politics, and Afghanistan may seem like a simple place, but it's not. You can walk into any room at any time. There will be people that have physical power, meaning they have a lot of sons. They have a lot of manpower to fight. They got soldiers. There will be people that have power in the status sense of way, meaning they have resources, they have money, they have land. And then you will see people that have power, meaning they have either a position in the government or they're knowledgeable, they're educated. You can distinguish each person based on how they speak. So any room that I went to, I knew exactly who had what kind of power because of me growing up in that sort of society. And I knew how to leverage each person's power or weak point to our advantage. And I understood the nuances in the culture really well. And I had a decent command of English and Pashto as well, to where nothing was lost in translation. Like how you say a thing to someone, that you mean it in a persuasive way or in a threatening way, or in a um, encouraging way, it could come across completely differently if someone's just translating word for word. So the tone matters, how you say it matters, your choice of word matters, all of these things matters. And I had mastered that just by being in tribal areas and following, my grandfather and his brother, who were always involved in heavy tribal politics. And I understood this. I knew how to build alliances with the local elders, how to help them, use our help to like reclimb the ladder, or the hierarchy. Um, there's this idea that if you were against Taliban, you needed support from either the local government, from the Americans, or if you had enemies. We have feuds all the time. Afghanistan is extremely tribal in the rural areas. Everyone has feud, everyone has vendettas. So I knew how to leverage all of these things to make sure that they were working for us, right? And because of my um, time in that same place for an extended period of time, um, I had a better understanding of how to deal with these people, because the soldiers, they would come in, they're doing 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and then they get rotated and they go back. That was home for me. I wasn't going anywhere. So over time, the connections got a lot better. I had phone numbers of different people, and any village, you named it. If I was out on patrol with the soldiers and I saw someone, we're going to have a conversation with them. The soldiers, usually the patrol leader or the patrol commander, and they would want to talk to like the locals, say, hey, how you doing? What's going on? Have you seen any Taliban? And so we had these minor interactions, and then with the exchange phone numbers, I was going to stay there. I all had the phone number, so I'd always give them my phone number. And before you know it, I think by the 6th or 7th month, I probably had over 30 contacts in our area of operation that I had, exchanged phone numbers with and information. And some of them had personal agendas as to why they wanted to help us. They either had a cousin to kill and they were going to use us to kill him, or they had the agenda of material gain from us, because we had a lot of projects, humanitarian projects, as a part of winning hearts and minds. So we had water pumps, we had mosque buildings, we had irrigation canals. We had like a bunch of these different projects, and we usually paid quadruple the amount that it would take for the project to be built. So everyone was trying to get one of those projects because they made good money. So the other reason was to like get one of those projects, and you wanted to be, on the good side. And then some people just genuinely hated the Taliban. They were true believers, like myself. I wasn't in it for anything else. My only two motives were, number one, I didn't see myself living in Afghanistan. I don't know why. I had the sense of duty and patriotism. I will never deny that. But I didn't want to live there, because I had read the books. I knew what life was like outside Afghanistan, and I just didn't see myself like spending my entire life there. But I obviously had a debt to pay to my country, and I felt like the Taliban were doing us wrong. And to this day, I feel that way. I don't regret anything that I've done. I served my country, and I'm proud of it. So we had these different agendas, and these different elements. And as a translator, you don't really have to worry about any of this. You could just do your day job, just go with the patrol, go outside, whatever is said to you in English, translate it to Pashto or Dari, and then take it back and translate it back. But I took it differently. To me, this was like a personal vendetta. It was my cause. I just didn't like them, and I remembered all these things that had happened throughout my childhood that made it very easy for me to fulfill the role and take on more responsibility. So because of that passion and because of my communication skills, I think, I had this massive network of sources that worked with me for the next 3 years. And, I passed on the information either to the unit that I was working with or other units. I also became really close with some Air Force intelligence units that they called it counter-intel work, but they were the ones that were mostly involved in neutralizing these threats and targeting the people that we were looking after. So I did both the legwork and I helped them with the information. I think for me, that was probably the most profound thing that I did in the war. More than anything else, like my career in the Marine Corps, or after that, my work with security companies in there and with the intelligence service of Afghanistan. It does not compare to what I did in those first 3 or 4 years. I think I lost you, Brian. Yes, still cannot hear you. Now it's good. Go ahead.
Yeah, and it may be a little garbled. I hope not. But I had to
It's
switch.
okay. Very little. Yeah, very little.
Right. So then when you were talking about those 3 years and building those sources of 30 plus people, and when you're talking also about interpreting or translating the inflection, the tone, the understanding the dynamics of it, this is one of the things that I've taught over the years and utilized in an investigative unit is when people are translating, especially dealing with life and death investigations or intel work overseas, or actually identifying the next person you're going to roll up. The translator in the police world, I would often have them sit behind the person that I'm talking to. And often in my field, it was Spanish. I'm not fluent in Spanish. There were so many gang members I was dealing with. I would have the officer or the detective, whoever's translating, stand behind the person that I'm talking to. And I'd have to explain to them, if I raise my voice, I need you to match that. If I'm taking a fatherly tone and that sort of, I'm going to need you to match that. Like don't translate in a flat tone. Mimic what I've got, but do not try to talk directly to that person. Only translate what I'm saying. And so often the person will want to turn around, and I would say, no, you look at me. Don't look at them. You look at me. I'm the one you need to talk to. And so after a while, and you know this, but I'm saying for the listeners, you kind of fall into a rhythm when you're talking that now that person, you can start to build on that human connection or that rapport building. But I know what you mean when you're building those sources and you're gathering that info and you're starting to also realize the politics involved or the long-term feuds that they've had but also utilizing everything as an asset. And then the unit comprehending and understanding the information you're gathering and what you're giving to the team. And I have to assume they worked as hard too, because they were realizing, man, like you're getting us really good info. We're moving twice as fast, and everybody seems to be motivated. I'm assuming that was the case, right, for those first few years like that?
Yeah. So the unit that I was primarily assigned to was a provincial reconstruction team. They call them PRTs. They're both basically a group of Army, PSYOPs, Civic, Corps of Engineers. These people, they had a they had a mission to make sure that they're winning hearts and minds through reconstruction projects, through all that. They hardly engage in anything kinetic, but we had a security forces platoon that was infantry platoon and that provided security for them. Um, so they were the Sec 4 for them. But the unit itself had to do with people and building connections and achieving the goal in long-term ways and less kinetic. So they understood the sensitivities of the community, and they knew that what I was doing was valuable. But because I liked action, everyone that came through my fire base, I went out with them. So if they were special forces, I went with them. If they were, infantry that came in there for a short while to like make sure that they're doing an operation clear, I went out with them. So anyone that came through there, or if it was like tactical intelligence teams, I went out with them. Because I had, I wanted action, and I was fully committed to what I was doing. To me, it was just very fulfilling, very interesting, and I was like, "This is it. I'm in the best place that I possibly can be. I have a gym to work out at, and I have plenty of food. There's plenty of ammo. There's a lot of Taliban to kill, and I'm going to be a force multiplier and try to do as much as I can." You don't have to necessarily be out there, doing the hard work yourself. But if I leveraged my connections properly, I could neutralize massive numbers of them. And to me, that was the goal. You just had.
Yeah, I think it's that finding that talent. Like you said, you didn't always know why you felt like that was it. That was where you belong. That's where you needed to be. I think for a lot of people, it's hard to understand that if they've never felt that. I think most people feel it in a normal day, normal job, maybe a hobby, music, athletics, that sort of thing. For some people, it's just something inside. You use the term, true believer earlier. I say that a lot in these fields. It's the sense of you believe in what you're doing. You have a higher reason for doing it. It's not greed, and it's not your own personal motives, but it's capitalizing on that. Now, when you were talking to people and getting information from them, did you just instinctively know, okay, this person's lying to me, or did you go through some training to where you could actually articulate it?
So, Brian, I was some of this work that I did, now that I have so much experience, I've done it on the private side for quite a while, and when I look at it, I'm like, wow, I had no idea why I was good at what I did. I didn't have any formal training. I was not a human intelligence collector. I didn't have any of this, but I found people interesting. I always find people interesting. Even now that I do private investigations, to me it's not the severity of what they do. I'm very detached from whatever they've done or whatever they do. I find it very interesting to see why they do it and how they do it. Their choice of action and their motive behind the action is what fascinates me. Um, because if if they're committing fraud, or if they're committing infidelity, I'm not really attached to that. I don't care about that. I'm very fascinated by how are they doing this. I want to know your process, your thought process behind, like, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and why are you doing this? Like, I want to know the root cause of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Trust me. People often ask me, they're like, oh, car chases and foot pursuits and fights and all this. And I'm like, yeah, that's part of police work. But the really like thing that grabbed me was people, was gangs, and why people join gangs, but then how they operated, and why this gang member was very different than this gang member, and just personality types. But I was the guy that once kind of the action was over, if we were chasing somebody, we'd get them into custody. And then I was like, I just wanted to talk to them. I wanted to pick their brain about everything. And I don't know, I used to get criticized early on. Officers would tell me, hey, you're just talking to too many people. Like, I don't like, this person's going to jail, whatever. They were running, they were fighting, they got drugs on them. Can we just take them to jail and be done? And I'm like, yeah, but damn, like, I don't know, that kid's 17 growing up in the same city I'm in. And like, I want to know why he did that, or I want to tell him, hey, thanks for stopping when you were running, putting your hands up and leaving the dope in your pocket and not reaching for it. And then I would tell them, you reach for something and it may be an elbow strike, it may be, straight to the ground, or worse, you get shot because I think you're going for a weapon. And I don't know, like, that was always, I mean, don't get me wrong, I loved a good foot pursuit and I loved, like car chases and stuff. But once I transitioned into investigations and worked homicide and worked FBI task force and doing gang intel stuff, I loved it. And kind of like what you were seeing, you were building sources and you knew the inner workings and the politics. It was the same way where I was building sources either in neighborhoods or people who were working in areas, but they had eyes on gang members all day because maybe they were maintenance workers, or they worked at a motel or a gas station, or I mean, some of the sources were, basically homeless people that would just hang out, but they would tell me straight up, that dude right there is nothing but trouble all day, man. And this is what he does. And they kind of give me that pattern of observable behavior where I'm like, okay, I just got to get a team in place, or I got to get myself in place to observe what they're doing every day. And then it's like, oh shit, like every day they're putting their stash of drugs in that chip bag. They're posting up right there. They're touching their waistband. They're adjusting it. Let me see how they act whenever a marked patrol unit comes through. You call it, you're like, hey, call a marked unit and go, hey, roll through real slow, just like you normally would. I'm going to be eyes on with somebody. And as they roll through, you see that person blade their body, grab their waistbands, and then you're like, I think we got something there on the waist there. We're probably gonna go with a weapon. Then you stop them, you get them in custody, you recover, and then that person, the source, whoever it is, they see it, and then it emboldens them, and they're like, okay, I don't have to live in fear every day. Like, now I've got to connect. Like I call big man and he makes some things happen, and then the biggest threat in the neighborhood disappears. And those things are applicable overseas as here, because like you said, we're dealing with human beings, we're dealing with deceit, we're dealing with greed, we're dealing with some people with just violent natures, and then we're dealing with regimes like the Taliban over there. It's an organization, it's an ideology, it's recruiting people and trying to stay in power, and then other forces saying no, we're going to push back, and citizens like yourself saying, this is my land, this is I have grown up in this oppression, and now I've got a chance to fight back against it. So I'm glad you and I were able to connect. And I do want to say this, like I always tell people, the power of Instagram, social media is overwhelming. I do truly believe, a lot more good comes out of it than bad when used properly. And you and I connecting is a prime example of that. Like it,
Absolutely.
we got to messaging and setting up this day to record, and I've been excited for a while. And what's interesting too is that hearing you talk about it, it's like, yeah, like you are the version of me over there at probably very similar kind of time frames, and the same things are going on, and the same skills and approaches are being utilized. It's just different organizations. It's just different terrain.
Yeah.
So now, so for you, as you were transitioning out of those first 3 or 4 years and that sort of thing, where did life take you from there?
So, um, 2008 is when I got blown up first. I've been blown up 3 times by IEDs.
Okay.
The first time, it's like you popped your cherry, you got
Mm-hmm.
an IED under your belt. And
Mm-hmm.
um, I had a friend who had been blown up before me. Was in local Afghan, he had his legs amputated, one at the shin and the other leg right above his knee. And I always talked to him on base, seen him around, and made me feel, like pretty terrible. Like every time I would see him, I was like, man, this is a young guy who came here and he's doing this work, and I don't know what his reasoning was behind it, but like I'm sure he's not in a good place. And also another Air Force guy, actually, he got killed in that IED, and then the captain that was the commander, he he went down a really uh, bad path. He was never at peace with himself afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Passed away later from those injuries,
Mm-hmm.
not the physical injuries. He passed away in the U.S., but um, it pretty much derailed his entire life. That incident did. So, um, just knowing people that close in my proximity that had been blown up, I always had this fear of like IEDs. I wasn't scared of gunfight. I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
I've been, God knows, probably over 300 firefights throughout my, time there. So I was never really scared of firefights, and there's a little bit of adrenaline, when that's
Mm-hmm.
happening. Like it's good. I chased that. I wanted that, but IEDs, they lurk. Like the fear of IEDs kind of like loom over you like this cloud. You don't
Mm-hmm.
know when it's gonna happen. You don't know how it's gonna happen. You don't know if you're gonna make it or not. So I always had that fear, especially knowing my friend Richie, who was a double amputee, and I always looked at him and was like, man, I don't want to die like that. So the
Mm-hmm.
first one happens, I survived that, I'm like, okay, I'm good. The second one happens, I survived that. The third one in 2009, June of 2009, um, I survive it, but I am no longer the same man that I used to be before then. So
Mm-hmm.
I had multiple fractures in my left foot, and I had some internal bleeding in my abdomen, and put me out for close to 4 months. I got airlifted and was in the hospital, and then I had to recover. And now going back, I'm not going to be the same man. I cannot run the same way. I cannot. I was the only Afghan interpreter who had the weapons privilege. So I was always armed, and I carried 2 grenades. So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I had, I was very much okay with um, using firearms. That was
Mm-hmm.
I was in it for that, and I wanted to, because later on, like the initial goal was go work there, learn all these things, live the books, hopefully somehow make it to the US and join the CIA. Like that's what I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to do. And I set everything in my life in that direction. I learned multiple languages. I did martial arts. I brushed up on all the soft skills in order to, do what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
So after that IED, I was never really the same person. So when I went back, I was like, hey, I can still translate documents and do, I still had my sources. So I was still talking to them. And so I was still valuable to the unit there. But it just wasn't the same. So I ended up going to Dubai to work at a bank. I did executive protection for the bank, and I stayed there for about 3 years. Went to school, and uh, just I did not like it. Like once you are used to that level of adrenaline and that level of action, um, I try to replace it with alcohol and girls, and like I try to replicate the chase in a different way, but it's very destructive in that way. Like you're not going to get the same amount of fulfillment, and in the process, you're going to get in trouble. So, was like, okay, I got to go back. So I went back, and then I started working again as a translator for a counter narcotics aviation program. And then on the side, also, I consulted at a security company, and then started working for the intelligence service of Afghanistan. That they dealt with a lot of Americans, but they didn't have qualified officers to deal with them, and that was just right up my alley. And I had made the connection with the head of the department from Dubai. He used to be a client of the bank, and he came there. So once he knew that, like, okay, this guy has done a ton of work and he speaks good English, and he can be used really well. So he's like, hey, why don't you come work with us? So I worked with them for the remaining time of like a year and a half before I got my visa and I came to the US. That was the whole point of all of that, was so that when I make it to the US, I'm able to immediately go to the military and, finish my career in the military, like do my 4 or 5 years, 6 years, and then try to get what agency, because that's what I set up everything for, right? Like all the languages, all the experience, it was all for that. So, and then I came to the US, and obviously it's so different, Brian. If I tell you that sometimes I feel like I've lived 300 years, I'll tell you why I feel that way. Growing up, like going to our country home, and literally burning bushes for heat source for cooking, no irrigation, no running water, no, like you literally had to go out, grab these bushes, chop them off, bring them back in, stockpile them all year long. You do this before the winter. You do it in summer, and you do it in fall, because the bushes are like dried by then. There's not enough water, and they're nice and dry. And you just cut them off, stockpile them in a special room to the roof, and then you burn them throughout the winter. And you burn them for cooking purposes all the way around. So when I see, like, that's a very primitive life. I've lived through it, like probably 300 years ago. Americans lived through it in the US, no running water, just like you eat what you kill, like it's just very, very primitive. And then from there, I come to the US, and then there is all these different amenities, all these facilities. It just seems like that change is too drastic. It's too drastic, So in order for you to catch up with the technology, and for you to catch up with the culture and the innovations and all that, it feels like I went through 300 years. And I'm
I
like, okay,
believe.
now, yeah. So
Mhm.
that's why I feel like I was like, oh my God, this is insane.
Yeah.
Because you have to shift everything. Um, you have to assimilate, obviously.
Mhm.
You have to learn the social cues that are here first. You have to understand your place in the society. You have to know how you can be productive, how can you contribute. Like all of these things take a lot of time, different value system. So, um, but I knew that military was going to be the best option for me. And my brother, who did the same thing as me, he did the same thing. When he came here, he came a little while after me. He did the same thing. He went to the army, and we're like, okay. Now, and also the only way for me to relate to Americans, it's very important to be able to relate to the people that, you live in their country or you live in that city or whatever. If you can't relate to the community, you're going to not have a good time. Like it's going to take you a while. So for me, I could not relate to the normal everyday American. And I don't
Mhm.
think I'm to be blamed for that because everyone that I came across was in the military. They were
Mhm.
all, they functioned a certain way. They're all programmed to talk a certain way, act a certain way. There's boundaries that you can't step out of. And then I come in and I'm in Houston and I look around and I see these people. Some are wearing, purple wigs and others are wearing, green colors. They have like these tattoos across their face and someone's walking their significant other like a dog, on a
Yeah.
leash. And so like you see all this and I'm like, holy shit. Like I
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, God damn, this is yeah, yeah.
It's, it's
You-
like it's like you don't have to take acid or LSD. You just you
yeah,
just
I
have that
was
transition, right?
thank you. That's the best analogy. Like I
I use it often.
yeah, I
Not
literally
LSD. I don't use LSD often. I use the analogy often.
yeah, no, the analogy is perfect. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it just seemed like an outer world to me. I was like,
Mhm.
oh my God. Um, so now I'm culture shocked, obviously.
Mhm.
Um, I don't have any friends. I don't have any family. I had two friends in Houston, but they had families and they're busy and it's different thing. And I'm like, okay, I can probably only hang out with them on the weekends, and I try to hang out with them or hit them up or like ask them for directions. And they were very nice and kind to me, and they offered the help. But the rest of the time, I'm by myself, and I have to figure this shit out.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
and I had also not been around a lot of African Americans before. Like
Mhm.
I'd been around a few, but I was not, like I knew that this was a thing. Like race is a thing. Like being um, in the U.S., you have to be able to communicate with different races versus Afghanistan, different tribes. People look
Mhm.
all the same way, but every tribe has a different, um, the way they go about life or their outlook on life and values are a little different. Whereas here, not that different races have different value systems, but they have their culture. Like
Mhm.
there's a culture within every race, and I think to deny that is to be racist. I think because
Mhm.
everyone's different. Like everyone has their own little thing, and that's okay. That's what makes it so beautiful. That's the part that I think the part of diversity that should be celebrated because that's
Yeah.
the beauty of it, right? So and now I'm in Southwest Houston. I'm around a lot of African Americans and a lot of
Mhm.
Hispanics, and I'm not Hispanic. I'm not African American, and I'm like, oh my God, like, is this what the ghetto is? It's like, I'm
Mhm.
in the ghetto.
Yeah.
I had to come to that realization. I was like, okay, well, this is not as bad as Hollywood makes it out to be. Southwest
Yeah.
Houston is really not that bad, but
Yeah.
I was in a rough area.
Mhm.
Then I was like, okay, I can it'd be a shame if I didn't survive Southwest Houston and I survived Afghanistan.
No shit. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um, uh, then I was like, okay, now um, I have to bring the same passion and the same drive and apply it to myself in my current life here in order to change the circumstances that I live under and still be productive. So it's like, okay, first job worked at a gas station, second job worked at a steel plant, and then Walmart. Well, before steel plant, Walmart, and then steel plant, and then I went to Marine Corps Reserves, and uh, I had initially I went to the Army. I asked them like, "Hey, my end goal is this." They're like, "Oh, well, you can go to the infantry and then go to selection, be in the special forces, or you can get a ranger contract from the get go, and um, you know, then once you're done with that, you can go work for the agency." So I was like, okay, this makes sense. And of course, me working in close proximity of the military, I understood how the military worked a little bit, and my friends had given me clues. So I was like, okay, Army seems like they have the most amount of options. I love the Marine Corps, but we're very different when it comes to when it comes to things like the Marine Corps is very challenging sometimes. Like uh, we get things done, but we also don't. It's like some things you,
Yeah.
you just and Army just seemed more fluid to me, right?
Mhm.
So I went to the recruiter, and they're like, "Well, you have to take this ASVAB test." And then at this point, I'd been out of school for such a long time, I didn't really know um, anything. I was like, "Okay, sure." So I take the test, and I score like 39, and the guy's like, "Oh, I can get you in. This is okay. Like as long as you score over 30, you're fine." I
Mhm.
was like, "No, but this is not okay for me. Like
Right. Yeah.
yeah, what I want to do, I
Mhm.
need to score higher." So they're like, "Sure, yeah." So they give me these resources. They're like, "You can go buy these books and do get on this website and do all that." Um, and I don't even have a car. I'm just taking the bus.
Mm.
And Europe, public transportation is completely okay. That's what
Yeah.
people do.
Yeah.
Everyone is taking the public transportation. And I thought, I was like, okay, well, this is the same thing. No, it's not. So I would take the bus and I'd go downtown Houston to the library to check out these books, or I didn't have a computer. I'd get there, get on the computer, do the tests or write emails or whatever, apply for jobs, and then take the books back um, to my apartment, read the books, like ASVAB textbooks, work on that. And then the Walmart, again, take the bus one way, 7 miles to the Walmart, take my
Mhm.
backpack with me, work the shift. After that, put my work clothes in the backpack, put on my running shoes and my shorts, and then run all the way back to my apartment and then
Mhm.
go to the park and take my textbook and fill out the questions and do pull-ups every 10 minutes. I'd do like 20 pull-ups or 15 pull-ups and then do the thing. So that
Mhm.
was like my life pretty much. Just simple, but amazing because I had so much hope. Like I'm in a country where you can achieve your highest aspirations. It's available to everyone, regardless of background.
Mhm.
Um, I think intellect is important, but your background does not matter. You have to be smart and you have to work hard. If you can
Mhm.
do those things, or sometimes if you just work hard, you'll make it. And you're a good person, you have good goals, you'll make it. So I was very excited about that. Um, the army takes too long to get back to me. I
Mhm.
have to get a secret clearance because they gave me an option 40. It's like a ranger contract where you go in, you do the infantry training, and then do the airborne, and then you get to try out for, um, I think it's called RASP or something. And
Yeah.
then
Mhm.
like, okay, so this is perfect. I want this. This is what I want.
Mhm.
Um, they take too long, and I'm just like hanging out by the recruiter's office. I'm a little depressed because like if you are stuck in the same situation for a while, whatever hope or inspiration you may have, it can fade away. You can go down, dark path. And you constantly have to either remind yourself um, or have someone to do that for you, to let you know, like, hey, look how far you've come. It's okay. You just got to stick it out a little longer and you'll get there. It's hard to do that sometimes. As I get older, it becomes easier. I become webbed with, but when you're young, you don't really think about it too much. So I'm just standing by the recruiter's office, and a Marine recruiter comes in. He looks at me, and I have a high fade, high and tight, and he's like, "Oh, looks like you'll make a good devil dog." I was like, "You know what? Actually, you're not wrong."
Right? Yeah.
He lures me in. He lures me in. He's like, "Oh, come on. Check some options with the Corps," so he's like, "What's your goal?" I was like, "My goal is combat arms. My goal is getting the fuck out of Houston as quickly as I possibly can. I'm tired of this. I cannot do this anymore. I have big goals outside of this. I can't waste my life." Because Army kept me for an year almost in the process. So he's like, "No problem. You just got to sign this release waiver or whatever, and I'll get your." He takes care of all that, and he's like, "Well, the only way that I can get you out in less than a month is the reserves. We have these slots open. You can go to infantry, do that, and then you can go recon or you can go to snipers." I was like, "Okay, this makes sense." So that I went and went through the training, and I was the oldest boot.
Which is a lot of fun, right? Because you've already seen action. God, you've already put in all this work, and then you got to play these, like we call them reindeer games, right? Like these stupid mind games. And
I laughed every day. And I smiled every day. It wasn't that I had no respect for the authority. I liked the drill instructors, and I respected them, and they were phenomenal people. But for me, it was just insane. It was just insane, these games that they played, and I knew what they were doing. I knew what the desired outcome was, so I just couldn't help it. I would just laugh, and because of me laughing, everyone would get wrecked, basically. Because they're like, oh, you think it's not enough? You think it's not enough? Get on your knees. And so everyone would get wrecked, and I didn't care, because like, what's the worst thing they could do to you? They just keep on like ITing you, intensive training or whatever. I loved it. I was like, keep going,
You're making your body harder. That was the thing, like,
And on top of that, like mind games coming from Afghanistan, and I think I probably had more combat time than probably anybody else on the depot at that point, because like, I've been in that shit for like 7 years, nonstop, day in, day out. So like, there's nothing you can do to me that will, like break my mind. So to me, it was like all fun and games. And I felt like, what if these guys are going to crack under like this, you're going to have a hard time, once you go, you go overseas, you're going to have a very hard time. So I don't think I was insensitive. But I just found it funny. I was like, "Oh, he's calling you Bubbles from that show, Park Boys or whatever. Like, oh, you look like Bubbles with your glasses, And he's making so like all of these things were very funny to me, and I just couldn't stop laughing. And because of it, I would always get wrecked. And then they realized, like, okay, and they knew who I was, so it was a little unfair. Then they're like, "Okay, we're not going to like do anything to him. Every time he laughs, all of your friends are going to pay." And in my head, I was like, "Okay, this makes it hard, because like now I have to have empathy for my friends and them going through that." But then I was like, you know what? Fuck them. They need this. So I was like, if
Yeah.
I'm being good, they're going to have a comfortable life, and we don't want that.
Yeah.
And
No, we don't.
regardless, yeah. So I was like, okay. I played along. So all that, and then I came back to my reserve unit, and I got a corporate job of selling mattresses. And, yeah,
Oh.
so
Mhm.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was your calling now, right? You were like,
That was my calling then,
yeah.
and I was like, oh, this is in my personal life too. I wasn't very fulfilled, and
Mhm.
so I I was like, this is not good. I stayed in the Marine Corps and went to uh, went to the sniper platoon, did the indoctrination, did all that, and I was like, okay, this is more fulfilling. I like this better, smaller unit, more
Mhm.
organized guys, a better like you just have a better experience. You
Mhm.
feel and you get a good understanding of the infantry organization when you go, like, but when you're a regular infantryman, you
Mhm.
don't pay attention to the big picture. You're
Mhm.
just like, right here, what can I do? Shoot my rifle, listen to my team leader. That's about it.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
try not to get killed. Like that's all what you care about. But once I went to sniper section, then you see the big picture of how everything comes together.
Mhm.
um so stayed there, but went to the pre-sniper and got hurt. I had been when I got blown up in 2009. They pretty much told me, like, hey, there's a 70% chance of amputation on your foot because it was just highly inflamed.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
might lose your foot, but we'll try to, like, make it work. But you'll never be normal again. You're not going to be able to run. You're not going to be able to even walk properly. I was like, okay. I never listened to those
Yeah.
advice. So
Right. Yeah.
and later on, I went, running. I was big into kickboxing, but I wasn't doing kickboxing anymore because I couldn't kick. The impact was just too painful on my foot.
Mm.
So I
Mhm.
got into boxing and jujitsu. So that was my, way of basically doing something physical and my release. Um, so when I went to the pre-sniper course, I had already done the NDoc and I'd done a bunch of missions, and I was in good shape and I could run pretty fast, and I was always good in all of those numbers, but I just didn't have the ability to carry load for that long because, like, my foot was, so I refractured my foot again, and they
Mm.
told me, they're like, listen, you could try this 100 times and you're gonna
Mhm.
fail it 100 times. That was the first time I realized that my physical injury had changed my life. Before
Mhm.
that, I never believed it. I did not believe it, and I was in complete denial of it. And I thought, I was like, I can overcome anything as long as I have the right attitude. That was the first time that I had to concede and be like, okay, you
Mhm.
actually have a problem. I accept it and see how you can work around this. Uh, that was the first time that I legitimately probably felt PTSD or manifestations of it, and in a way that I had never felt before.
Mhm.
Like, I may have had like anger issues, bursts, nightmares, but now I just felt like they just pulled the rug from underneath me. I'll
Yeah.
never be able to go to the agency. I'll never be a spy, and everything that I've worked for thus far is taken away from me.
Mhm.
So that was a um, huge issue, and I just couldn't get my head around it, and I was completely unfulfilled. My job was unfulfilled with the military, and also my personal life was in shambles. I was in rock bottom. It's like,
Okay.
this is it.
Mhm.
You failed. Um, And then I was like, I have to try another way. I have to do something else. I have too much passion to
Mhm.
just sit around and do nothing with it, you know? And I think other vets can probably relate to this. Um, you're never the same guy after it's over. When
Mhm.
you're in it, you're not the same guy. You feel like you're this cooler version of yourself, you know, a
Mhm.
lot cooler than before you got in. Um, the best moment is probably while you're still in and you're in action and you're constantly feeling the chase and the rush, and there's so much adrenaline and dopamine that you don't necessarily care about anything else in life. That's all that you care about. When you get out of it, all of the rushes go away, and then the reality of life hits you, where you're like, well, life is not as interesting as I thought,
Mhm.
especially now when you don't have anything to look forward to. um,
Mhm.
so very, very dark place for me at that time. For the first time, I felt depressed in my life. I was like, oh my god, depression is real.
Yeah.
This is what uh, other vets must feel, and um, so thankfully, again, resorting to books
Mhm.
for inspiration, I just found a way. Jiu-jitsu. I'm a huge proponent of jiu-jitsu for veterans. Like, I'm speaking anecdotally. I'm not a researcher, not a scientist. I don't know exactly how it works, but I know from experience that it has helped me a lot. I always had something to look forward to at the end of the day, no matter how hard life was, no matter how disappointed I was with myself or what I had to deal with. I knew that for 1 hour at the end of the night, I can go to a place where no thoughts are relevant, where I have no thoughts
Mhm.
in my body. I'm not in my head. I'm in my body. I'm experiencing the full strength and capability of my body against another human being. Um, and it's also, I think, just the physical touch of it. It helped me uh, immensely to get out of that headspace and have something to look forward to. And then obviously doing tournaments and doing competitions, that was always like a further goal that I looked at, and I was like, okay, I have to do this. And I knew that I've made this commitment to myself that for the rest of my life, I will always be in a field where physical prowesses are going to be critical for
Mhm.
my survival or my success, and people will um, question my credibility if I lack it, So,
Mhm.
and I think it's important for not just veterans, just if you're a police officer, extremely important. You cannot
Mhm.
out on the streets um, if you're not constantly working on the things that will save your life, whether that's drawing as quickly as you
Mhm.
possibly can, whether that's, you have to be full game on. Like, you cannot lack that. It has to be a constant thing where you're improving on daily basis, or you're practicing so that you don't lose the
Mhm.
skills. So yeah, definitely, I knew that, okay, for the rest of my life, physical prowess is very important. So I have to be good at jujitsu, and I kept doing it, and it helped me, and with my mental health as well. I finally came to the conclusion that the passion and the drive that I have to apply it elsewhere now that I can't go, work for the agency basically. I still could have, but the pipeline that I wanted was like, okay, go to snipers, become a sniper, qualified, and then go try for the what's it called, paramilitary.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that, because they take only from tier 1 or tier 2 units. So I was like, okay, I can't just be a regular infantry guy and do it.
Mhm.
Um, I could have, but I had to go a longer route and get my college credentials and all ready. And so I was like, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And I started my own company. of doing security. And
Mhm.
that was a leap of faith that I had to take because I never thought I would own a business. I never
Mhm.
saw myself as a business guy,
Yeah.
you know?
Mhm.
But it's insane how things translate if you just find the connection. How you do anything is how you do everything. There is, once you find the way in one thing, you can find the way in multiple things. Um, I always knew how to make a deal. Obviously, I had these,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I had these sources. Somebody, oh, you want the well? Yes, I want that. Okay, well, whenever I call you, you're gonna pick up your phone, and just talk to me. And
Mhm.
so I was always in contact with people, and I knew how to make a deal. So started the thing, took a leap of faith. Didn't know anything um about the industry other than like, okay, you just protect things. I have,
Yeah.
protect people. Um, and so I took the test, and they have a state licensing exam, and I read up on that. Just nerdy stuff. I got that.
Mhm.
I was like, okay. Um, Passed the licensing exam and started my company, and I'm like, okay, how the hell do I get clients now? Like, yeah.
Yeah.
And I quit the job because the job was draining me. I
Mhm.
was not fulfilled there. I did not like it at all. I was like, okay, now I just have to focus on this business, but how the hell am I going to make clients?
Mhm.
That same drive translated well into this too. I said, no matter what I have to do, I'm always going to feel a level of discomfort with myself. I can sit there and not do anything about it, or I can apply it in a productive way where it benefits me and it benefits the society or people around me. So it's like, okay, I should do that. Then I started, you know, obviously marketing on Facebook and Instagram and, these things, and reaching out to people and leveraging connections as
Mhm.
I did before, to get contracts. And thankfully, I was able to do pretty well. I have I'm pretty happy with what I do right now. I'm doing good. Life is good.
Mhm.
I feel productive. I feel fulfilled, and uh, now this is my mission. Now I feel like I'm
Mhm.
contributing to the society in a positive way, and it also is helping me, and I'm learning constantly. I'm
Mhm.
learning constantly, and that's the game. As long as you're addicted to learning, you're gonna have fun.
Yeah. Dude, that is I think probably the common characteristic when I'm talking to people and met people that are successful. And my definition of success is you set a goal and then you reach it. Or you're in a business or a realm where it's successful in the sense that you have longevity. You can continue to work for just yourself or you can hire people, but it's that ability to learn, to always constantly be looking at it like, okay, I've got 12 customers now. How do I make it 20? How do I make it 25? I've got a guy that I ran across years ago, and eventually he got his life straight. He had some rough patches, and he eventually started his own company. So he had served time in prison when he was a kid. At one point, kind of was in a very violent area and surrounded by gang members in that sense. He never really was full on gang member, but doing all the gang stuff. But then eventually he kind of has a change in life. He starts to get a little bit older. But when he starts his company, he's like, I wanted to work for myself because I had started to work for 5 or 6 years for an employer, like a more of a corporate type business. And then he started to realize he could do it himself and that he could be his own boss. But he said when he was growing up, no one ever told him that. The only
Mhm.
kind of boss they told him is like basically get a connect or get a plug and sell this amount of drugs, and then you just kind of want to work your way up. Like it was always the drug game. It was always this criminal angle. But for him, he was it embedded like in his brain. He just always wanted to learn. He started to realize his own internal dialogue, or monologue to himself was so negative. And when he had kind of flipped that switch, probably in his mid-20s, he realized that he was putting up a lot of barriers, whereas you were always kind of hurdling over these barriers and going like, okay, now, like when you're talking about like, now I'm in America, now I've got to do this, now I'm gonna take the bus, but then I'm also gonna run to stay in shape. I'm gonna constantly learn. As I'm learning, I'm also doing physical exercises. Like for him, he had always been telling himself he could never really amount to anything. He could never have a normal job. Nobody would hire him, you know. And so to watch him grow his company and still have people telling him, no, like you can't work out there in this county or that county, back to race, hey, there are white people out there. They don't like you. You're a black guy kind of thing. He was like, no, actually, some of my best paying clients were out there and they were, driving pickup trucks and listening to country music. And they were cool with me. I'm cool with them. He's like, he was starting to realize where he grew up in what, people would call the ghetto. Like he was starting to realize, oh, everything I've kind of been told is bullshit. Like, people really kind of, it comes down to, are you going to be cool to me? Are you a threat or not? If you're not a threat to me, are you a friend? Are you going to be cool with me? And then that's about it. Like the race thing falls apart in that sense. Then in the real world, most adults, that's all they care about. Like, as long as you're not a threat to me, I can pass you on the street. We're good. And like you're saying, when you came to America and then to start to learn that history and cultures, and in the last 10 or 15 years in America, it's kind of ramped up. Like it's now become this bigger issue that it wasn't in the 1990s, like when I was a kid or when I was in the Army. I was in an infantry unit, and I've always mentioned this, there was so diverse in the infantry platoon, nobody cared. Everybody's green, so it's like, you either perform or you can't. Like either you're going to max your push-ups or you're not. If I hand you, back then it was the saw, or the 249. If I hand you that and you can't clear it, disassemble it, reassemble, like it doesn't matter. I don't care if you're from the north, from the south, black, white, like whatever. Learn your weapon, learn your job. So I love that, like when you're talking about like learning, like the constant fascination with learning, looking at how do you take your skills and your abilities in the private sector and then build on that. And that's one of those things too, when you were talking about like your long-term goal about wanting to be in the agency. It's interesting when people either have long-term goals like that and then things happen or it gets shifted or kind of in their minds maybe even derailed, but then they start to learn, okay, well, I can also do this. Like it's not over. It's not the end all.
Bounce back.
Yeah. I'll make a little prediction. I think that the future doors, I think, are going to open up a lot more in the sense that you're so solid, I think, in building networks, human networks, and connecting. Those doors will constantly open. I mean, that's kind of my look into the future, and I'm pretty good at predicting the future. I've done it quite a bit, and I think it's just cycles of behavior maybe that I'm looking at. I'm looking at
patterns. It's patterns. So I agree with you. I have friends. I usually, like, they'll come up to me with a problem, like, oh, I'm dating so and so, and this is some of the problems, and I know the other person, and I've seen their patterns of behavior before, and I've seen this person's patterns of behavior. You can always piece them together and predict how the future will be. And when I, when you tell them that, they're shocked. Like, how did you do that? I was like, well, it's very evident from what you've done in the past and what you've done, what they've done in the past, and you kind of have a course of action, what's the most likely of it, what's the least likely, and you tell them what it will be, and it ends up being that. So I agree with you. People follow their patterns and things, that if you're on a good trajectory, this is the part that I find it fascinating sometimes, because in my mind, I had done everything right to be where I wanted to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
The only part that I had no control over was obviously the injury. Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I'm not a, how should I say this? I'm not a particularly religious kook, or,
Mm-hmm.
a spiritual person or any of that, but I know that beyond our plans, there is a different reality that sometimes does not run parallel to ours.
Mm-hmm.
Because um, I'll tell you, like the day that I was getting blown up severely, that morning, I woke up. Normally, you probably, every normal person feel this way. Like when you start the beginning of your day, you kind of know what the end it will be like. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be on my recliner. My
Mm-hmm.
dog Rogers will climb up on my foot, and I'll be petting him, and I'm going to watch my favorite show. Maybe I'll have a cold beer, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Like you just predict the end of your day. You kind of know how it's going to be. And then most likely it ends up that way because you've done it for so long. I had that same vision, usually, even though the reality of life in a combat zone is so unpredictable. You cannot predict things, but once you've done it long enough, you kind of have a pattern that you know what will happen. I knew I was going to, normally, if I was going on that patrol, I knew that at the end of the day, I'm going to be at the lake house. I'm going to be sleeping on my sleeping bag. I'm going to, I don't know if you remember those zone players or whatever, those big old black bricks that
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And I knew that I was going to be listening to music on my zone player, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
chilling out, probably eating snacks out of an MRE. I knew that, no,
Mm-hmm.
that was the normal pattern. This day, in the morning, I could not foresee the end of my day. I
Mm-hmm.
did not know what it was looking like. There was a feeling um, of uncertainty that I had never experienced before. That was the wildest thing.
Mm-hmm.
Sure enough, 10 o'clock, boom. Uh, and then I wake up 3 days later in the hospital, and there's like tubes coming out of me. And, life has changed forever after that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it worked out for better, but to your point, the bounce back, sometimes, regardless of how well we have our plans and how closely we follow them and how we achieve them, there will be setbacks or failures or things that will happen that looks like failure, but how you respond to that actually is what makes you unique.
Mm-hmm.
How you respond to that, because like, yeah, we've worked all this time to like get to this conclusion, to get to the finish line, and you're so close to finishing, but now you have to start all over again on a different track from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
uh, that's where you see your strength as a person. That's where you see your challenges, your shortcomings, everything becomes evident there. And that was the case for me, because once I knew, and I had to deal with the aftermath of it, obviously severe depression. And I was like, oh my God, now I know what my friends feel like. All this at a time,
Mm-hmm.
I always had some kind of high. I always had the high of chasing a goal. Now that I can't achieve that goal, I just feel like I'm in a prison. I'm in a prison of my own mind. And so when I started there, I was like, oh, okay,
Mm-hmm.
now I have to reroute my focus and channel it to this field of work, and I have to get ahead in this. Um, but the key is being open minded
Mm-hmm.
I say open-minded doesn't necessarily mean the bad ideas, but you have to be at least okay with examining an idea or a concept without any judgment, and just like watching it unfold or like be told to you. Don't react to it. Just listen with what's going on. See the end. If you like it, go do it.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't like it, that's okay. It's probably not for you, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that type of mental flexibility probably had a lot to do with me being able to adjust my focus from what I was doing before to what I'm doing now.
Yeah, when you talk about like waking up in the morning and then having that uncertainty, um, I have not heard a whole lot of people describe that. Now I've heard some people though say like my wife and I talk about like we can see ourselves as an elderly couple. You know what I mean? Like we can see ourselves
Yes.
down the road. Like it just all of that just kind of is natural. In the same sense of I could always kind of see my future necessarily like what I was doing day to day, and I kind of could project that. But that uncertainty like that, there is something that I don't think that as human beings so far we've been able to tap into, I don't think anyway, fully to understand certain people that are in tune with themselves and their, I guess what we articulate as intuition or reading people or reading the patterns. I don't think we fully have tapped in and understand what we are capable of when we're reaching almost these higher levels of operation. And I think we feel it most when we're doing what comes natural. Like that idea, like you were saying, you felt confident in a firefight. You could understand, rounds are incoming from this location or RPG rounds or, like I've got movement here, I've got movement there. The things that you could not battle were the unknown, the explosives. But I fully get what you're saying, and I fully understand when you're operating like that and you're reading the terrain, you're reading people, you do almost start to move before they do. And I guess the closest thing researchers call it like kinetic intelligence, but I used to read people very, very good, like on the job, and I'd switch like that real quickly and be like, no, like, don't you fucking get up from that curb. And they're like,
Yeah.
whoa, bro, I'm not getting up. I'm like, no, you're fucking thinking it though.
Yeah.
Keep your ass right there on that curb. Like you just switched on me. And they're like, no, I swear I didn't. I swear I didn't. Because I was always very like calm, even tempered. But then I would change to let them know.
Yes.
And then later, oftentimes guys will say, bro, I ain't gonna lie, man. You were reading my mind. Like, how'd you do that? Because I was locked in. Like, but really, I think I was just reading their shift, their eyes shifting for a second. The micro expressions, the anxiety, maybe because they're about to commit to trying to get up off that curb or fight, or they're trying to think, can I take this dude in a fight? And I've done it too, interviewing people, and I've told them, during shootings and stuff, and explained to them what their actions were pre-shooting and after the shooting that I didn't fully know. I knew what witnesses were saying. I might know about this gang member and know more about their background, their personality types, but I could explain to them almost like what they were thinking. And when I was right, it would blow their mind. And I had a guy during an interview, and he's shaking his head, and he's like, no, you're right. Everything you're saying is right. And then later he's like, yeah, but that won't me there. I'm like, oh, no. Like I told you what you were thinking right when you saw old buddy, and right before you started started unloading your rounds, and then right after what you thought and how that all broke down. And later I was talking to a buddy of mine, and because he was watching the interview, and he was just like, man, how'd you know that? I said, I just kind of felt it. I could feel what his actions were. And some things I knew, some things I didn't. And if I was wrong, I was wrong. It didn't matter. But that's exactly it was almost like I could read his brain.
Yeah.
And it wasn't always that way. But man, when it does, it is like so fine tuned. And interviewing people and reading their body language and understanding the whole game. You know, there were times when I was interviewing multiple Crip gang members during a shooting and fully grasping the whole scene, everything, and I'm having to bounce from person to person and putting it all together, and without boring everybody. But it was one of those things of like being able to, even while a guy is falsely confessing to me, to explain to him, actually, you're wrong. You're full of shit. You're about to really mess up. I'm not going to allow you to give this fake statement, and it's on me. Don't worry. You're trying to do right, but like, but also we got in depth with some other stuff. But I do think that it's tough when you step away from that. You know, for me, when I retired, like when you were saying, you know, coming to the U.S. and regrouping and getting into a different field, and you still got these goals you're going at. When I retired, that always comes up where people are like, "Oh, do you miss it? Do you miss this and that?" I don't miss it. I enjoyed operating. Yeah, I enjoyed operating on that high level, and I loved having team members that were incredible, like the best of the best. And we'll talk offline about some stuff, but that I really enjoyed. But I really do not miss that. I love what I'm doing now. I love life now, and I did not make police work my identity. But damn, I was fully committed. You know what I mean? like I did not. I don't know. I identified with the goal, the ability to do what we were doing, but fully happy when I was able to retire and live the life I live and have this show and meet people. And I don't know, dude. It opens doors, and I absolutely love it. Now I'm going to switch gears real quickly because we were talking about history, recognizing patterns. One of the things I talked about with Worth Parker was like the American history when I was a kid and watching footage as I got old enough to learn about the Army and read books about Vietnam. I watched footage as a young teenager of the fall, what they call the fall of Saigon. You know, America is extracted from Vietnam and there are helicopters flying out of the embassy. And I remember as a kid just feeling like just horrible, like that felt horrible to me, even though it happened years before. I was watching this footage, and as a kid, I didn't fully understand other than, man, that's like knowing what was going to happen to the citizens in Vietnam afterwards, after America pulled out. And then flash forward to watching the same thing unfolding in Afghanistan, you know, and I think that's one of those things that I love studying history and reading history, but I cannot stand watching it repeat itself. And that was what it felt very similar in that sense, seeing that. And now there's a component behind the scenes, if you're cool with talking about it, about how you were able to use technology basically and reach out to Worth during that time frame.
Yes, absolutely. No, I agree with you. It's um, like you said, that we can predict behaviors of individuals based on their previous patterns. I think the same can be said about large groups of people, maybe countries and organizations based on the previous patterns. So it's not too far from, imagination that something that had happened in Saigon would happen in Kabul too, similar, especially if you look at it, we're there to back up the South Vietnamese and, help them fight communism and all that, whether how those events transpired and what is irrelevant. And I think at this point, not important, but what happened was real and true. And then the same thing in Afghanistan, we have the Afghan government that we're backing up, and they're trying to fight this invading force. We can say that because most of the Taliban were comprised of transnational, international jihadists that have made a living of going from a place to place to place to another place, and doing what they're doing, promoting that ideology, and conducting violence to further their goals. So I think based on that pattern, you can see it like, oh yeah, well, that happened over there. We got overwhelmed with the amount of load we had to carry. Obviously, same thing can happen here too. Um, yeah, so because of my involvement and my brother's involvement with the U.S. military, and then what we had done before, um, what I had done before, like on, I was wanted like hard, because I had spent a lot of time in the same area, doing a lot of damage. So they tried to kidnap me when I was still in Afghanistan, you know.
Okay.
So I knew that they wanted me bad. And by association, my family was in danger as well because, I had done things that they had perceived as like against their family, lock up their kids, or the the reality of war. We don't even have to go to the details of it, but the grim things. So I knew that it wasn't going to be safe for my parents, and I was closely following the situation, and I was trying to get them out before then. My father, I pretty much, like 5 generations that I know in my bloodline, they had all been in the military. My father, my grandfather, my great grandfather, and myself and my brother. So um, I knew that, like, even if it wasn't for our involvement, just by my dad being in the Afghan Air Force and being a colonel, he was going to pay the price, basically. So I arranged for them beforehand, sent, applied for them, and they were in the process of coming to the U.S. when the fall of Kabul happened. So I had not had this amount of devastation in a long time, other than, whenever we had a friend that, died in combat or something, I would get devastated about it. But this is the very first time that I was feeling something, um, a tragedy, first of all, because I knew that everything that I had worked for, everything that my friends had worked for, my friends who died there, it went in vain. Like, all of that was reversed. We try to keep these people free for 20 something years. We try to give hope to the people that otherwise wouldn't have it. Now all of that is gone. We've let a very barbaric, primitive force take over the lives of 30 million people, so that felt very personal to me, and not just as an Afghan, but as an Afghan who had fought against them, as an Afghan who was in the U.S. military, as an Afghan who had seen friends die, an Afghan who had been in it myself and been injured. So I it was devastating. I was sleepless, and I was worried about my family, of course. So, like, I'm sad, disappointed, and anxious, you know, um, because I still have my parents there. Um, those first 24 hours, I didn't even go to sleep. I was just at a cafe, drinking black tea, drinking coffee, working, monitoring the situation, trying to reach out to anyone and everyone that I could possibly reach out to. I knew some guys that had been in the same training cycles with me and the Marine Corps, and they were deployed there. So I reached out to them, but these are enlisted, junior enlisted warriors, as we call them. you know, they're not up there, and it's hard to expect anything from them. I reached out to other officers that I'd worked with, and it was nothing short of miracle when I reached out to work, because um had I not like went down a list and like sent the same message that was like copy pasted, and I would just change the like addressing them,
Yeah.
and I was just going down the list, just like literally looking down at anyone that I thought was going to be able to help me out. And sure enough, I had been in contact with him before over for the article that I wrote, and I knew, he um I was like, I'm just gonna reach out to him. Let's see. He was in the Marine Corps, he was an officer, he was Marstock commander, maybe he has somebody. Um so I reached out to him, and he's like, man, can't promise you nothing. Sorry it's happening, but we'll see what happens. He didn't really promise me nothing, and I didn't think about it. I just went off, and I try to reach out to other sources. And then one day he's like, hey, I think I can help your family. So he had done his part on his end, which he's talked about. Um, and I couldn't believe it. I was like shocked. But I told my parents, I'm a realistic person. I think it's important to always get a good check of the reality, because like if you don't, you can be very optimistic, and then it can turn into a delusion, or you will be severely disappointed when the outcome is not up to your expectation. So I told my parents, I was like, you guys have to be ready. I'm not sure if it's going to work or not. What I do know for sure is if you stay there, you're going to die 100%. If you try this, there's a glimpse of hope that it might stick, that you might make it, but you have to try it. If you stay there, you're surrendering and you're accepting your fate.
Yeah.
So I was like, just take it for what it is. And he told me, I was like, okay. He told me, well, they have to be at this point using this password at this time. I said, sure. I called them. I said, don't take anything. Leave your belongings behind. Whatever amount of cash you have, grab it, give it to my mom, scrub your phones, delete anything that would associate you, pictures or whatever, just reset, factory reset those things, and make sure you don't have any contacts with anybody. Memorize my number. If you have to like call me, just memorize my number. As soon as you're done, delete it and don't leave anything. And then just make the excuse. Don't grab any clothes either, because they can tell. You can tell when someone's going out of town. Like they're not going to just come bareback, right?
Yeah.
That just don't grab any clothes. Tell them that my mother's sick and you're trying to get to a hospital close to the airport. Just try to make it through the checkpoints. Sure enough, they go through these 3 checkpoints. Now, looking back at it, it looked like there was an understanding that the Taliban were not going to necessarily stop people. They might have, depending on how much of value you had as a target to them. If you're like a higher ranking, or if somehow they found out who you were related to or how you were related to them, sure, they're not going to ask like, oh, let me read you your Miranda rights before I put this around in your head. They're not going to do that. They're
Right.
just going to do it. So they made it to the checkpoint, and they told the Marines the password that Wirt had given me. The whole ordeal must have taken about 3-4 days. And in this 3-4 days, I can tell you, I probably slept like maybe 2 hours.
Yeah.
I was completely devastated. As soon as they said they're in and they're with the Marines, I just had this like, I'm a Marine, and I knew my friends, and I knew what it was like. Okay, this is amazing. Like I remember word saying hallelujah, I was like, hallelujah, this is amazing. And then after that relief, I tried to help out whoever else that I knew that I personally worked with. You know, we had a gentleman who had a shop on base, and he would, you know, bring us cookies and soda pops and cigarettes and, you know, things like that. And he was on base, and he was reaching out, and then whoever else that reached out, I try to direct them like, okay, this is what you have to do. This is what you, and the next 2 weeks or so. Um, but yeah, it was nothing short of a miracle. It had to have been for pardon me, um, for both the technology and some kind of an intervention beyond my logic. Like, oh, just reach out to this guy, you know.
Yeah.
But I'm happy they're in the U.S. My brothers are here with me too. My parents are here. They're getting ready to get their green cards. They're still dealing with the, you know, whole status adjustment. But they're going to pursue the similar career field as me. One of them wants to go to the Army, the other one to the Air Force. So
okay,
total of 4 of us.
Man,
Yeah,
that's outstanding, dude. I I will say this, Jason. It's incredible. I don't know. I hope people can fully understand it and grasp it. I don't know. I think that a lot of people born in America have it so easy and don't fully understand how horrible war zones can be and how horrible one human being can be to another. Um, and the silver lining is people can also be great to one another and incredible and,
absolutely.
you know, extend themselves and put themselves in harm's way and extract people. And now, you know, you have your family here in America and they're setting their goals and they're moving forward, man. It's incredible. And I love hearing that. Um,
Thank you.
I know one of the things that I wanted to ask you earlier is you had mentioned music, and one of the things you would talk about, you know, at the end of the day, you're listening to music. Does music still matter as much to you? I mean, do you still listen to music or what?
It matters, but I've become very selective with music. It's one of those things. Um, so I remember when I had no idea of American music when I started working, like late 2006, 2007. Um, and we would ride in these Humvees to the valleys, you know, to our on our patrols and stuff. And the guys would hot mic the intercom.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
grab their little earpieces and hot mic the intercom and play music, so that way, like all 4 of us or all 5 of us inside the Humvee could listen to music. And so through that, the first thing that I took an affinity to was like metal, like heavy metal, you know.
Yeah.
I was a young guy, I was an angry guy. It spoke to me, you know, and and then hard rock as well. When I looked at the lyrics too, I was like, oh, this is like, I like this. I can relate to this. It's not about like shooting cops or sleeping with prostitutes, selling drugs. You know, this is more
Right.
like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
beautiful music. So we always look at things from um, our own perspective, right? If it rhymes with us, we stick with it. If it doesn't, we don't want to deal with it. Um, so yeah, then I think Rammstein, that was
Okay.
like that was my go-to, followed by Disturbed, Linkin Park, and Breaking Benjamin.
Mhm.
So I just had like that almost similar genre, and I listened to it on patrols, before patrols. Uh,
Mhm.
at night I would like probably switch to something calmer, something a little more ambitious. Um, Now, obviously, going through so many different stages, so many different countries, so many different experiences, um, I've come to a different understanding with music than I did when I was younger. I could listen to music all day long and not appreciate it, you
Mhm.
know. Whereas now, I listen to it in small chunks of time. So, like, I listen to it. I stopped listening in the car. I
Mhm.
Before, I like whenever I was going somewhere, I'd blast music all the time, and I lost appreciation for it, doing it in excess like that, right? So
Mhm.
now I'm very selective, and if let's say if I'm working on my guns, if I'm
Mhm.
repairing, guns, or if I'm cleaning them, or if I'm working with my hands, I'm working on my car, or I'm um, doing something that requires, some level of like motor skills,
Mhm.
I will switch to like classical symphony or something and feel my uh, focus through the music.
Mm.
I can
Mhm.
I can really enjoy it. If I'm working out, um, I just completely switch to very happy. If I'm running specifically, I listen to like techno. you know,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
like trance
To
or
keep that cadence or that beat.
yeah, it
Yeah.
keeps the cadence with the beat.
Yeah.
Uh, and then if I'm going to jujitsu, I'm like, you know what? Let's listen to some gangster rap. Like I'm about to go play murder with my friends in a padded room. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Might as well get the attitude on, right?
yeah, yeah. Let's talk about selling drugs and yeah. So, um, but I also love country music too, and that was a big part of the soldiers' lives that were around me. I don't know. I feel like sometimes when I speak to people and they learn that I was born in Afghanistan and I grew up there, and then I listen to country music, and sometimes some of the things that I say they come out so sudden that they're like,
Yeah.
"Where are you from?"
Yeah. Yeah.
So I definitely like country too, but like old country, like Johnny Cash,
Mhm.
Willie Nelson, and um, yeah, those guys. But um, I think with country, I'm probably more. That's more of like a road trip.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
road trip occasion.
The storytellers. Yeah. They're
Yeah,
great storytellers.
they're definitely. Um, but like I said, with all of it now, I'm a lot more selective. I'm like, I want to enjoy music in its entirety. I want to be very selective with it and limited with it, but I want to enjoy it in a very lip licking way. Like, this is good,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I can fully relate, man. Well, look, Jason, what do you want to plug your company and talk about it? Like how people can reach out if they're interested. And the reason I
uh,
say that is there are listeners who, if you're on social media, they'd love to follow you or communicate with you, but I also fully respect your privacy.
I appreciate it. My company is called MEYER Defense. It's meyer.defense on Instagram. Um, I I mean, yeah, the name sounds pretty interesting, but it's my tribe's name. So it's like,
Okay.
okay. And then when people
Mhm.
ask me, like, Meyer Defense, are you German?
You're like, no, I'm from Texas.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah. I,
Just mess with them.
People believe that, I tell them I'm from the valley. They believe that I have a mustache, and they're like,
Yeah.
yeah, he's some type of Mexican.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But I appreciate you,
Hmm.
the opportunity. I hope that um, the listeners, if they listen to my story, I make up a very small percentage um, of people that helped the U.S. troops in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people who have sacrificed a lot more than I have, and they've went through terrible times in helping the American soldiers, and they're still stuck. They're still in Afghanistan, and
Hmm.
um, they're not able to, live a normal life. They're living in fear. There's still a large number of us out there. I hope that my stories have reflected a little bit on um, our lives and how we have endured things alongside the American soldiers. And mine is probably nothing exceptional. There are guys that have done a lot more than I have. Unfortunately, not all of them are either here because also a lot of my friends died. We had a lot of interpreters that died, and they were dug then like a carrot somewhere, and nobody ever remembered them. There's not even a memorial or nothing dedicated to them. Not that there should be, but what I'm saying is they've paid the price. They've sacrificed a lot, and I think it's worthy to remember that there were people who did help. Um, that probably haven't been either like remembered or compensated for what they've done. There's still a lot
Hmm.
of them living in Afghanistan in fear. A lot of them are still uh, persecuted and um, killed by the Taliban. So I hope that this brings some awareness to those
Hmm.
guys. Um, and,
Yeah.
that's about it. But I
Yeah.
appreciate.
I appreciate your time, Jason. I'm quite sure here in the near future we'll get our schedule straight, come back on and do some more talking about some other things. Like you said, you've lived a very long life, and there are some things that we can get into the minor details about that I think a lot of people are going to have a lot more questions about. The role of interpreters, the role of what America was, going through, what Afghanistan was going through. So I appreciate your time, buddy, and we'll do a future episode here pretty soon.
Thank you so much, Brian. Have a
All right,
good
buddy.
day, and thank you for everything.
You too, buddy. Take care, man.